Imagine this. You're standing in a room where the walls are made of mirrors, not ordinary mirrors, but ones that reflect not your face, but the faces of everyone you've ever known. Your parents, friends, co-workers, strangers who've crossed your path. Each mirror whispers a demand: smile wider, agree faster, apologize sooner. You nod, oblige, adjust your posture to match their expectations. But when you glance down at your own body, you see nothing but a silhouette, a shadow so faint it dissolves if you stare too long. Your hands, once calloused with purpose, are now translucent, as if the act of holding others' needs has drained the pigment from your skin. You are a ghost in your own life, haunting the edges of everyone else's story. This is the paradox of the eternal people-pleaser. The kinder you are, the less you exist. You've spent years perfecting the art of accommodation. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny, swallow opinions that burn your throat, and orbit others' desires like a moon with no gravity of its own. At first, it felt noble, a martyrdom of the soul, a way to keep the world frictionless. But lately, a question claws at you in the quiet hours. What happens to a heart that never insists on its own rhythm? You notice the signs, the headaches that throb like unsaid words, the dreams where you're screaming into a void that swallows sound. Your relationships feel like performances, your achievements like empty rituals. You are loved, needed, praised, and yet, there's a hollowness beneath the applause, a voice, yours or someone else's, hisses, "Is this really kindness, or a slow suicide of the self? Consider the waiter who serves everyone but forgets to eat, the parent who shrinks their dreams to fit their child's, the friend who becomes a mirror, reflecting only what others want to see." Society calls this virtue. But what if it's violence in disguise? A silent war where the battleground is your identity, and every yes is a surrender. Here lies the great question: can we be good without erasing ourselves? Think of the last time you swallowed a truth to keep the peace. Recall the metallic taste of dishonesty, the way it curdled in your stomach. Was that moment really about kindness or fear? Fear of conflict, rejection, of being seen as difficult. The Japanese have a term, hone and tateme, the true self and the public facade. But what happens when the facade becomes a sarcophagus? When the mask, worn so long, fuses to your skin? You've been taught that niceness is moral currency, but currencies can devalue, systems can collapse. There's a story etched into your bones, older than civilization, the myth of the selfless saint. Religions praise humility, cultures exalt sacrifice, and parents drill into children: don't be selfish. But no one warns you that the word selfish is a loaded gun aimed at anyone who dares to say, "I matter too." So you contort. You become a cup that never cracks but never fills, poured out for others, brittle with emptiness. Yet here's the unsettling truth: your relentless niceness doesn't heal the world, it sustains its sickness. Every time you mute your anger, you endorse the conditions that caused it. Every time you abandon your boundaries, you teach others to trespass. You are not a peacemaker, you're a silent accomplice to your own eradication. And the most chilling realization, they don't even notice. The people you've bent yourself around sleep soundly, unaware of the corpse you've buried beneath their approval. You've become so skilled at playing the ghost that even you forget. Ghosts are born from unresolved pain. But wait, before you dismiss this as another call to just be assertive, understand this isn't about rudeness. It's about rigor, the kind demanded when a surgeon cuts away necrotic tissue to save a life. What if true kindness requires teeth? What if the most compassionate act is to stop feeding the lie that you are infinite, replaceable, disposable? The mirrors in that room are cracking. You feel it, don't you? The tremors beneath your feet, the way your reflection flickers, fighting to solidify. Something primal is stirring, an ancient, neglected part of you that knows. Survival isn't about being loved. It's about being real. But how did we get here? How did a virtue as pure as kindness become a chain? To unravel this, we must descend into the labyrinth of the human psyche, where societal myths, neurological wiring, and philosophical failures collide. The labyrinth begins with a puppeteer, not a person but a myth, one so deeply woven into the fabric of society that its strings feel like your own nerves. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the parts of ourselves we exile to the unconscious, the instincts and desires deemed unacceptable by the world. But what if the real shadow isn't your rage or greed, but the very act of cutting yourself into pieces to avoid casting one? Consider this: a child learns to laugh when hurt because tears make adults uncomfortable. A student swallows her brilliance to avoid outshining her peers. A lover smothers his needs to keep passion from erupting into conflict. These are not acts of kindness. They are rituals of survival in a system that conflates goodness with convenience. Society's unspoken contract: disappear gracefully and we'll call you noble. But why do we sign this contract? Friedrich Nietzsche saw it first. On the Genealogy of Morality, he dissected slave morality, the inversion where weakness becomes virtue and power becomes sin. The people-pleaser, he'd argue, is modernity's ultimate slave, worshipping humility while secretly resenting the strong, the free, the self-possessed. Your niceness isn't altruism, it's resentment, a bottled fury redirected inward, a way to moralize your own subjugation. Beware those in whom the urge to punish is strong, he warned. But what if the person you're punishing is you? Arthur Schopenhauer took it further. In his view, the human will is a blind, thrashing force, a will to live that demands assertion. Yet the eternal accommodator wages war against this instinct. You starve your will, call it selflessness, and marvel at the emptiness that follows. Schopenhauer's grim conclusion: life is suffering. But he failed to ask, what if the worst suffering is self-imposed? The machinery is both ancient and eerily modern. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World imagined a society pacified by pleasure, where citizens love their servitude. Swap soma for smiles, and the dystopia is here. Social media algorithms reward performative empathy. Workplaces promote team players over truth-tellers. Even spirituality markets enlightenment as ego death, as if the path to wisdom requires erasing your footprints. But the deepest wound is neurological. Studies on conflict avoidance reveal a chilling pattern. When you habitually silence your needs, the brain's amygdala, the seat of fear, learns to treat authenticity as a threat. Neural pathways rewire. Your voice becomes a foreign language. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith, lying to yourself so profoundly that you become the lie. You're not a person anymore. You're a function, a lubricant for the world's gears. Viktor Frankl, survivor of Auschwitz, offered a counterpoint. In Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote that even in hell, the last of human freedoms is the ability to choose your response. Yet the people-pleaser surrenders this freedom daily, not to tyrants, but to polite requests, not to violence, but to the fear of awkward silence. The tragedy isn't that you lack courage, it's that you've been taught to see courage as cruelty. Herein lies the trap. The system pathologizes your hunger. To want, truly, fiercely want, is labeled selfish. To say no is unkind. To prioritize yourself is arrogant, so you ration your soul like wartime provisions, believing scarcity will earn you love. But love earned through self-betrayal is colonization. The puppeteer's greatest trick, convincing you the strings are salvation. Consider the Japanese concept of ame, the indulgence of depending on others' goodwill. Healthy ame nurtures trust. Toxic ame creates emotional parasites, people who consume your yeses like oxygen, leaving you gasping. Your generosity becomes their entitlement, your silence becomes their weapon, and when you finally crumble, they're baffled. But you never said you were hurting. The German language has a word for this dynamic, Opferrolle, the victim role. But in this script, everyone loses. The tyrant never grows. The martyr never lives. Both are trapped in a dance of mutual destruction, mistaking control for connection, collapse for care. So why can't we stop? The answer lies in a primal fallacy. We believe love is a transaction, that if we deposit enough niceness coins, the universe will vending machine us validation. But as Sartre observed, hell is other people. Not because others are cruel, but because we let their perceptions define us. You've internalized the gaze of an imaginary jury, their verdicts etched into your bones. Be smaller, be quieter, be less. But what if the jury doesn't exist? What if the courtroom is empty and the chains are self-forged? The mirrors from the first scene weren't just reflecting others, they were reflecting your complicity. Every time you traded authenticity for approval, you fed the myth that kindness requires annihilation. But Jung's shadow whispers a secret. What you exile doesn't die. It festers. The rage you bury metastasizes into depression. The boundaries you neglect become cancers of resentment. You don't save anyone by sinking with them. You just drown louder. Now the walls of the labyrinth tighten, the myths unravel. But before escape comes the storm, the consequences of a life lived as an apology. You wake to the sound of a clock ticking, not an ordinary clock. This one counts backward. Each tick measures the hours you've spent swallowing truths. Each tock echoes the moments you folded your spine to fit into smaller spaces. Your body, once a temple, now hums with the dissonance of a broken instrument. Migraines bloom like dark flowers behind your eyes. Your stomach knots itself into hieroglyphs of unspoken rage. The doctor calls it stress. But stress is too small a word for the civil war raging inside you. This is the arithmetic of self-betrayal. Subtract your voice enough times, and the equation starts subtracting back. Cognitive scientists call it cognitive dissonance, the psychic scream that erupts when your actions clash with your beliefs. For the chronic people-pleaser, dissonance isn't episodic, it's atmospheric. You breathe it. Every suppressed no layers onto your lungs like asbestos. Over time, the weight reshapes you. Studies show that habitual conflict avoidance shrinks the prefrontal cortex, the brain's seat of decision-making, while enlarging the amygdala, turning you into a skittish animal, flinching at the mere prospect of existing. Your biology conspires against authenticity. Dopamine, the reward chemical, spikes when you please others, addicting you to your own erasure. Cortisol, the stress hormone, floods your veins when you consider stopping. You're both the puppet and the puppeteer, jerking your strings to the rhythm of others' applause. But the body keeps score. In Japan, they recognize karoshi, death by overwork. Where is the term for death by overkindness, for the woman who smiled through her husband's affairs until her immune system attacked her thyroid, for the man who applauded his boss's exploitation until his coronary arteries narrowed into whispers? Medicine maps symptoms, not silences. Yet research reveals a chilling pattern. Those who chronically suppress anger have 50% higher rates of cancer. Repressed grief doubles the risk of heart disease. Your cells are archivists, recording every stifled cry in the language of tumors and autoimmune storms. Relationships too curdle in the dark. You've built your life on a lie, that love thrives on endless compromise. But study the couples who never fight. Often, their peace is a burial ground for unmet needs. The parent who never disagrees becomes a stranger to their child. The friend who never sets boundaries becomes a resentment factory. Psychologist Robin Dunbar found that human brains can only maintain 150 meaningful relationships. Yet the people pleaser, terrified of exclusion, hoards connections like cheap souvenirs. The result? 1,000 shallow bonds that leave you lonelier than solitude. You've confused being liked with being known, and in that confusion, starved. Now zoom out. A society of eternal accommodators isn't harmonious. It's comatose. Cultural revolutions die as polite suggestions. Scientific breakthroughs stall under consensus. Art becomes echo, not exploration. Recall the Asch conformity experiments of the 1950s, where subjects denied obvious truths to match group lies. Now extrapolate that to boardrooms silencing whistleblowers, governments criminalizing dissent, and algorithms feeding you moral comfort food. When niceness is the ultimate virtue, progress becomes the ultimate sin. History's darkest chapters weren't written by tyrants alone. They required armies of nice people following orders. Philosopher Hannah Arendt called it the banality of evil, genocide administered by bureaucrats who just wanted to keep their jobs. Today's banality is subtler, a million micro-surrenders that let corruption thrive. You donate to charity but ignore the colleague drowning in burnout. You recycle while banks fossilize the planet. Your niceness isn't neutral, it's complicity laundered through good manners. Yet the most insidious consequence is metaphysical. By refusing to cast a shadow, you've made yourself invisible to the light. Jung warned that the unclaimed self becomes a demon, not a mythic beast, but the quiet terror of a life unlived. You see its fingerprints in the rise of depersonalization disorders, where sufferers feel like ghosts in their own bodies. In the surge of existential anxiety clinics, where patients whisper, "I don't know who I am anymore." Entire generations now speak in memes and borrowed identities, their true voices atrophied from disuse. This isn't a mental health crisis, it's a soul crisis, a silent famine of authenticity. The clock ticks louder now. You feel it in your joints, your dreams, the way your laughter cracks at the edges. This isn't burnout, it's awakening. Your cells are rebelling, your psyche is picketing. The suppressed self isn't gone, it's tunneling toward the surface with the desperation of a buried miner. Each panic attack, each night of clawing insomnia is a distress flare. You were not meant to live this way, but here's the rub. The system needs your compliance. Every corporation, toxic relationship, and oppressive norm thrives on your fear of rocking the boat. So it gaslights you, calls your rage irrational, your boundaries selfish, your truth divisive. It pathologizes your hunger for meaning as hubris. And you, trained to mistake suffering for sanctity, kneel deeper. The clock's hands tremble. Time is not just running out, it's demanding payment. How many more sunrises will you greet as a hostage? How many loves will you orphan to the lie of niceness? The cost compounds daily, in phantom pains, in stifled genius, in the collective sigh of a world waiting for permission to burn brighter. But what if the fire isn't your enemy? What if it's your forgotten self, screaming to be let out? You stand at the edge of a cliff, but the drop isn't into darkness, it's into fire. A pyre of every yes you've ever uttered, every mask you've worn, every lie you've called kindness. The flames hiss a truth you've feared. To be reborn, you must first let yourself burn. This is not a metaphor. History's greatest liberations began with conflagrations. The suffragettes torching societal expectations. Nietzsche declaring, "God is dead," to kill humanity's addiction to external validation. Rosa Parks' "No" that ignited a civil rights movement. Rebellion isn't rebellion until it terrifies you, until it demands you choose between the world's love and your own. The first step, recognize that niceness is not morality, it's a social anesthetic. True goodness requires teeth, the kind that bite through illusions. Viktor Frankl's freedom to choose your response isn't a platitude, it's a weapon. Wield it, the necessity of sacred selfishness. In 1943, psychiatrist Karen Horney shattered the myth of the virtuous accommodator with her theory of the tyranny of the should. You should be generous, you should never disappoint, you should be liked. These shoulds, she argued, are mental prison bars. The antidote, radical self-reclamation. Consider the Japanese practice of kintsugi, repairing broken pottery with gold. What if your fractures aren't flaws but proof of aliveness? Start by demanding 1 hour a day where your needs are non-negotiable. A walk without your phone, a meal you don't share, a thought you don't sanitize. These are not indulgences, they're acts of holy defiance. Neurologically, each selfish act starves the amygdala's fear response and feeds the prefrontal cortex. You're not just changing habits, you're rewiring evolution. The art of holy defiance. Friedrich Nietzsche's Übermensch, the overman, wasn't a superhero. He was anyone who creates values rather than inheriting them. Become your own Übermensch. Unmask. Sartre's bad faith dies when you stare into the mirror and name your lies. I pretend to be patient because I fear conflict. I call my silence kindness when it's cowardice. Speak these truths aloud. Their power evaporates in the light. Disappoint on purpose. Start small. Cancel a plan. Disagree politely. Watch as the world doesn't end. Notice whose love was conditional. Rewild your voice. Ancient Celtic poets called it imbus forosnai, the light of foresight that comes from howling truths into the dark. Write a letter you'll never send. Scream into a pillow. Sing off key. Reclaim sound as yours. History's rebels mastered this. When Beethoven defied his deafness to compose the Ninth Symphony, he didn't write music. He carved a path through the impossible. When Audre Lorde declared, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation," she wasn't being radical. She was being sane. The neurological revolution, neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire, is your secret ally. Studies on assertiveness training reveal that after 6 weeks of practicing no, subjects' brains show decreased amygdala activity and thickened prefrontal cortexes. You're literally building a fortress of selfhood. But rebellion has a shadow. Guilt. The first time you set a boundary, it will feel like murder. You'll hallucinate sirens, hear phantom accusations of selfishness. This is the death rattle of your old identity. Let it die. The ripple effect. Your defiance isn't just personal, it's political. Every time you refuse to shrink, you give others permission to rise. In 1969, when the Stonewall rioters hurled bricks at police, they weren't just fighting for queer rights. They were rejecting the demand to be palatable. When Greta Thunberg snarled, "How dare you?" at world leaders, she exposed the violence of polite inaction. Societies change when individuals stop asking, "Will they like me?" and start asking, "What world am I legitimizing?" The Phoenix Protocol. Rebirth follows a pattern. Incinerate the lie. Admit how much you've lost to niceness. Weep, rage. Embrace the void. The space between who you were and who you'll become is terrifying. Stay there. Reconstruct with gold. Build a new self from non-negotiable truths. A client of Carl Jung's once dreamt of killing a knight in shining armor. Jung's interpretation: you must murder the perfect facade to birth the real self. You are not here to be inoffensive. You're here to be alive. The fire awaits. Dawn breaks over the ashes of the pyre. What remains is not a corpse, but a question, one that has haunted humanity since the first human traded a truth for a tribe's approval. What is kindness worth if it costs you your soul? The answer lies in a paradox so profound it reorders reality. True kindness is not the absence of self. It is the full-throated presence of it. You've been taught that sacrifice is sacred, but what if the most sacred act is refusing to sacrifice yourself? When Nelson Mandela forgave his jailers, it wasn't meekness, it was power. Having claimed his right to exist unbroken, his mercy became revolutionary. When Frida Kahlo painted her pain instead of hiding it, her art didn't just heal her, it gave the world permission to bleed openly. These weren't saints. They were warriors who understood you cannot offer the world your light if you spend your life extinguishing your own flame. Here's the ultimate truth, carved into the bones of every great philosophy. The boundary between self and service is a lie. Carl Jung's individuation, the integration of shadow and light, wasn't a solitary pursuit. It was the recognition that wholeness in one person creates ripples of wholeness in others. Neuroscience confirms this. When you express authentic emotion, mirror neurons ignite in those around you, sparking chain reactions of courage. Your liberation becomes their permission slip. But this demands a radical redefinition of goodness. Viktor Frankl's logotherapy asserts that meaning comes not from what we take, but what we give. But you cannot give what you've annihilated. A cup poured empty quenches no thirst. Nietzsche's Übermensch, often misread as a call for selfishness, was actually a plea for sovereignty. Only those who've claimed their own depths can serve others without resentment. The ancient Greeks had two words for love: philia, reciprocal care, and agape, selfless giving. Modernity forgot the third, philautia, love of self. Not the narcissistic parody, but the Aristotelian ideal. To be a friend to oneself is the condition for being a friend to others. You cannot offer the world your genius if you've buried it under a mountain of apologies. This is the razor's edge: to care without collapsing, to give without disappearing, to love without bargaining. Consider the moon. It does not beg the tides to praise its glow. It simply is, and by its steadfast presence it moves oceans. Your authenticity works the same way. When you stop contorting for love, you become a gravitational force. People may orbit or flee, but those who stay will be drawn to your realness, not your performance. Yet the world will resist. It will call you too much, too loud, too alive. Let it. History's moral leaps were never made by the agreeable. The abolitionists were called troublemakers. Climate activists are labeled unrealistic. The dying words of the martyred philosopher Hypatia still whisper through time, "Reserve your right to think, for even to think wrongly is better than not to think at all." But here's the secret they don't teach you. Your darkest wounds are portals to collective healing. When you stop hiding your scars, they become maps for the lost. When you voice your rage, it becomes a torch for others groping in the dark. The Japanese art of kintsugi teaches that brokenness, mended with gold, becomes more luminous than perfection. Your cracks aren't failures, they're sacred geometry. This is the final reckoning. The cost of eternal niceness is not just your joy, it's the future. Every stifled idea, every swallowed protest, every muted dream is a theft from humanity's evolution. The symphony of progress needs dissonant notes. The Mona Lisa began as a blank canvas. You are the unpainted masterpiece. So let us revise the myths. The Garden of Eden wasn't lost because Eve ate the apple. It was lost because she apologized for her hunger. Prometheus wasn't punished for stealing fire. He was punished for giving it away before claiming its heat for himself. Your life isn't a moral ledger. It's a frontier. As you stand in the ashes of your old self, remember, fire doesn't just destroy, it reveals. The phoenix doesn't rise despite the flames, it rises because of them. Your scars are not proof of damage, they're proof of aliveness. The ultimate truth is this: you are not here to be good, you are here to be free. And in that freedom, that unyielding, messy, glorious aliveness, you will do more good than 1,000 lifetimes of polite compliance. The clock no longer ticks, it rings.